we will look at definition and scope of sociology. This is the next topic. Although the definitions are just given for you to understand, for you to just appreciate, and so that you can keep them as and when use. Maybe one or two definitions you can use in your answer. Usually, the question will be related to the scope of sociology, not so much the definitions of sociology. I will still discuss a few definitions just so that you have some content with you. Even if you forget one definition, you may not remember another definition, and that will help you write it. But more importantly, I will spend a little while, if we go till there, I will spend a little while on how different social sciences, or how the new modern disciplines of social sciences were born in the context of Europe. Whether it's economics, whether it is political science, the way we know it today. I mean, political science has existed forever. Economics has existed for more than 2,000 years. But the question is, in their modern variant, the previous explanations are not the way the explanation is this time. So one of the things we will be doing is, I will try to explain to you, and this is also a good thing. I mean, we are all in the modern era, and it is important for you to know how did all of these disciplines, how were they born? Why were they born? Why was each of those disciplines born? They were all, again, like sociology, they were also responding to very specific circumstances. Once you appreciate that, once you appreciate how all these modern disciplines were born, one thing that will happen is when the question comes, so another set of questions that generally come, which is the next topic, it is comparison with other social sciences. Now, that's a topic that you'll have in every optional. Any subject you take, they compare themselves with other optionals. So the reason why I will go into that detail is, one, it's an interesting story, how history was born, history as an academic discipline was born, how economics was born. How quickly, 5 minutes, I'll give you a summary. Once you're able to get that, it is important because every academic discipline has a specific nature to it, has a specific reason. It attacks a particular kind of issue, problem. It understands something very specific. Once you get the spirit of why a particular academic discipline was born, when the question comes, what is relevant to the syllabus is comparison with each discipline with sociology. So one question is compare political science and sociology, economics and sociology, psychology and sociology. What are the differences, or compare and contrast? That kind of a question comes. Now, the thing is, for you to be able to answer that, you need to really understand what is the difference between these disciplines. And I will go and try and give you an overview of that. And once you get a hang of that, then telling you what is the difference between sociology and economics, or sociology and political science. Among social sciences, among the family of social sciences, in some ways, economics and political science are social sciences of one kind. Then history and anthropology are social sciences of another kind, which is why I put them into different families. Then psychology and philosophy are, again, they are not even social sciences. They are strictly, philosophy is in the Department of Humanities. It is not a social science. Psychology also has an independent existence. It is not really a social science. Now, that is the thing. You may imagine they're all social sciences. They are very, very different subjects. And I will try to show to you how each of these are very different in terms of their vantage points, in terms of their subject matter, in terms of their scope, in terms of what the discipline is itself. We hear this since our childhood. About 7th, 8th, we start listening to these words, economics, political science, but we never pause to understand what does that even entail? What does it exactly mean? And I will look at that, but that is if time permits and we go till there. Probably psychology and philosophy we may not. Let's see. Now let's go into trying to define sociology. Definition of sociology is not part of the syllabus, but for you to appreciate scope of sociology, which is part of the syllabus, you should write a word or two about the definition. Usually they go together, which is why I gave about 5-6 definitions. Read all of them, try to memorize whatever you remember in the exam. Just write that, not necessary key. And also, if you don't remember the name of the person, don't bother. It is all right. Now, the word sociology, in fact, any academic discipline you take, it'll have its roots in Latin words. So sociology also has its root in Latin. Socio comes from the word societas. It basically refers to the social or the society. And logy, whenever logy is there, whether it's biology, sociology, any logy, logos refers to study of, science of, knowledge of. Actually, it refers to knowledge of, but eventually it became study of and science of. Logy comes from the word logos. Logos means knowledge in Greek. So this is basically Latin and Greek words. That is how sociology is born. Um, yeah, etymologically, sociology concerns itself with an analysis and explanation of social phenomenon. Now, there are two kinds of phenomenon. There are anything that you observe outside of you. There's always two kind of phenomenon that are happening, either social or physical. Whether it's the weather, whether it is rain, whether it is anything else, whether trees growing or trees dying, or all of this are physical phenomenon. And then there is social phenomenon. All your politics, all your markets fluctuations, your buying, selling, your interaction with a shopkeeper, your interaction with an auto driver, your interaction with your mother, your father, your colleague, your friend, going together to a movie. All of these are social phenomenon. Everything is social phenomenon. Now, sociology attempts to analyze and explain these social phenomenon. Okay, it studies social life, actions, behaviors, and incidents. Okay. It's pretty self-evident. I'll quickly go into some definitions. I'll not go into all of them. They're not very important. I'll go into a couple of them. I think that should give you an idea of what they are. So Comte and Durkheim, these are big sociologists. They're also part of your syllabus. I think we'll just see their definitions. Sociology is the science of social phenomena subject to natural and invariable laws, the discovery of which is the object of investigation. Now, okay, now these definitions may seem like, okay, what is this? What are they even saying? Don't bother. Sociology is the science of social phenomena subject to natural and invariable laws. Now, pause there. Understand that Auguste Comte is one of the first sociologists. In fact, he believed, so remember I told you, there is a promise of science, and they saw how physics is able to discover the natural laws of the universe. After Newton, working on Newton, various scientists eventually discovered laws of physics, whether it is magnetism, whether it is electricity, whether it is laws of motion, whether it is thermodynamics. They figured that there are laws to this universe, natural laws, and universe is only manifesting itself according to these laws. Nothing happens outside these laws. Everything is determined and governed by these laws. And once you are able to understand these laws and formulate them, you can then manipulate reality to your advantage. So this engagement of this promise in those natural laws is also because in those days they still couldn't understand ki the social world is very different from the natural world. They imagined everything is natural. Okay, so if there are natural laws to the physical world, they just imagined there must be natural laws to the social world too. After all, it is that material that makes chemicals, and those chemicals constitute human life, and that human life then emerges into our social life. So all of this should be determined, right? How can it be? I mean, so there must be a natural law to this. That is the faith. And if you now look at that definition, sociology is the science of the social phenomena subject to the promise of the natural law and invariable laws. Of course, I mean, Newton's laws of motion is not going to vary for you or me, or it's not going to vary one thing in Vishakhapatnam and another thing in Hyderabad, or one thing in India and another in Europe. In fact, The laws of motion are universal, which means anywhere in the universe, they are the same laws. Now imagine first time you're listening to this, and it is great revelation. It is a promise. And early sociologists like Auguste Comte gets gripped by this promise, and he believes that the same natural and invariable law applies to social phenomenon as well. And the discovery of that law, look at that line, the discovery of which is the object of investigation. The discovery of those laws, just like Newton discovered the natural laws of motion, uh, we will discover the natural laws of social world. We will discover natural laws of social interactions. How do people interact? We will discover natural laws of um, poverty. There might be a natural law to poverty. We will discover that. So that is the object of investigation. That is the object of inquiry. This academic discipline investigates or inquires into those natural laws according to Auguste Comte. Now that is his definition. I hope now you understand what he's even meaning. Durkheim says sociology is the science of social institutions. Now, this is an interesting definition. For this, you need to understand what an institution is or what a social institution is. And social institutions are, last time, in fact, in the first class, I gave a detailed explanation of what a social institution is. They refer to patterned behaviors between human beings. Okay, so between a husband and a wife, there is a pattern of behavior. In conventional societies, the wife ensured that the Indian traditional society, the wife ensured that food was available, house is clean, laundry is made, whatever. No, and man was supposed to provide, to protect, to give security, to bring provisions, things like that. So the role of a wife and a husband is a patterned behavior between two humans. And what are the roles, responsibilities, rights, duties between these two is very defined. It is defined differently for different culture, but at least in that society it is defined, and to that extent it is a social institution. It's called marriage. That institution is called marriage. Church is an institution. Church is any religious organization. Church, when I say, every time I say church, don't think of Christian organization alone. Church refers to a religious organization. So think of even ISKCON as one kind of church. Okay. So what is a church? Church is a religious organization where there will be a priest, there will be a layman or a believer in a particular deity, in a particular ideology, in a particular religious worldview, and they interact in very patterned behavior. So if you go to a temple, to a Hindu temple, the behavior is very, very specific. You go, you ring the bell, then you go, you prostrate in front of the image of the god, and then you circumambulate, you production, what you call, you said, and you get, and there is arti, and you get. So any temple you go, that is what happens. So that is an institution. Okay. So all of these, school is an institution. Any school you go, there'll be a classroom, there'll be a teacher, there'll be students, teacher will give a lecture, students will listen, students have to raise a hand when they answer. Again, very, very regulated, very patterned kind of a behavior, and all of these are institutions. Now the interesting thing is, Durkheim believes, and a lot of sociologists in those days believed, that these institutions have an existence independent of the people who are making it. Now tell me something. Take something like language. Okay. Can you, language precedes you. Yes, language exists only insofar as we all speak. But we are also governed by the rules of the language. We are not born and say, oh, let me and you make our own language rules. That doesn't work that way. You are governed by the rules of that language. You are governed by the rules of the institution. Today it is slightly different. When most of you are born in the last 30 years, just not even 30 years, most of you. So you will not appreciate. But for a long time, in fact, until this modernity is happening, people didn't have a say about any institution. What they have to do in church is given and they will do it. What they have to do in a marriage is given, they will do it. How they have to behave in a market is given, they will do it. So you can't just go and change and decide what else to do. No, it is already pre-given and you just follow it. So in some ways, these institutions existed imposing on individuals, and they didn't have a choice how to regulate it or how to navigate it. How to navigate was already given, and that is the only way they could move under those social institutions. This is important, because when we study Durkheim, you will understand why Durkheim says sociology is the science of social institutions. It is, they believe that if you understand those institutions, you will believe how those institutions then regulate our behavior, how those institutions shape our social actions. So if you understand the institution, it tells you how it shapes our social action. I'll give you an example. And this is a slightly controversial example. I will expect that you have the maturity to understand. You're not children, you're not kids. You are attempting to answer one of the toughest exams in the world itself. Please have the maturity and understand what I'm saying. Don't be childish. Very often, you will notice that in any government department, whether it is the police or whether it is, I am from the customs department, we deal with one collecting customs duty revenue. That is the revenue function of it. Whenever something is imported, we collect the duty. Then there is a security function. We ensure that smugglers don't enter into the country and don't smuggle things into the country. So whether it is smuggling of gold through airports, drugs through sea routes, we ensure that smugglers don't come. So we have a security function and a revenue function. And I noticed in my department and in other government departments, in railways, in police, in civic administration, very often officers or staff, government staff belonging to the reserved category do not occupy very challenging roles. Okay, they do not occupy very challenging roles. So, say police department, crime branch, investigation are the cream posts, task force, crime, investigation. Same with in customs, we have intelligence, revenue intelligence, which is a cream organization. And if you take, very often, most often, the heads of these organizations or predominant number of officers in these organizations happen to be from the general category and not the reserved category, although the staff in whole are 50-50, roughly 50%. For every one reserved officer, there is a one general category officer. But somehow, for really elite sections or elite roles within the organization, they are predominantly filled by officers and staff of the general category. And I have been curious why that is the case. And my own investigation and my own analysis led me to believe that, say a new batch of inspectors joined, in our case, customs inspector, police inspector, visualize anything that you can visualize. 10 inspectors joined, 5 reserved, 5 general category. First day, first of all, even within the government, we are also creatures of the society. Again, caste system is an institution and we are creatures of that society. And because of that, even if we study sociology, even if we write civil services exam, even if we clear it, even after entering the government service, certain amount of this influence will remain on us. Okay, and we will think in terms of invariably we will believe that people of certain caste have certain caliber and people of certain other castes don't have certain caliber. No, this is a thinking that people come with, and maybe a little lesser than the general society, but it is there. Now, there itself, they make a distinction, and usually the senior officer will give the more challenging task to the general category as opposed to the reserved category. Now, do you notice what's happening? The institution of caste system, which is regulating our belief of who is competent and who is not, is automatically making me choose one officers of a particular general category for more difficult tasks, and from reserved category to less difficult tasks. So you'd see how the institution is having a bearing on individual choices. But let's assume there is a sensible officer and he doesn't make that distinction, and he picks two officers, one from reserve, one from general, both for the same task. One crime has happened, or in my case one smuggling event has happened, and I pick two officers, two newly recruited officers, general and reserve, and say, both of you go solve this case for me, investigate. Now try to visualize with me. Okay, some of you are urban bred, so I don't know if you will fully appreciate, but try to visualize with me. Usually, if you are from one of the upper castes, okay, one of the upper castes, you have not experienced entry barriers. You have not experienced walking into a house and somebody, or you being told by your parents or grandparents not to enter somebody's house or not to touch their food. You've not been told. On the contrary, if you're a reserved student, particularly if you're from a rural background, you will know that, again, not so much in your generation, just your, I am 100% sure for your parents' generation, this is the case. And that is that if you're one of the lower castes, you will be told that you can't enter houses of upper castes, or you can't go to certain places with slippers, or you can't touch certain things, certain foods, or water, or the extreme cases you have read. You can't touch well, you can't go to temple. These are still prevalent. Even today, they are prevalent. But at least one officer has faced some kind of a discrimination in his life and the other hasn't. Okay, the open category officer, the general category officer has not faced discrimination, and the reserved category officer at some level may have faced a discrimination. Even if he is a child of an IAS officer or a judge, very likely he, at least from his grandparents, something he has heard, something. Now, when these two people enter a crime scene, and the crime scene is, say, a very powerful man, usually they are powerful men, wealthy man, powerful man. In our case, let's say we go for raids. There have been raids which I did of ministers. Huge. There was one raid that I did where there was a scam of 7,000 crores. And you have to walk into the house of a minister. When you're doing that for 25, 30 years, if even few instances, as a child, as a very young child, especially if you're growing up in a small town or a village, 100% you'll have that experience. If not you, at your parents' generation, 100% they'll have that experience of being told to think before you do, because you're not supposed to do that. No, caste rules don't allow it. But if you're a general category, if you're a Brahmin or an upper caste or one of those, there is no, you've never faced a restriction. You never had to stop and think, can I touch this? Can I go inside? Can I open the gate? Can I ask that person? Now, when these two people go, can you imagine how boldly or how effortlessly, how smoothly, how without inhibition, without a fear or insecurity, the open category officer will just enter, open the gate, move, knock the door, call the man out, ask his name, inquire, investigate, interrogate, what is happening, why did you do this? As opposed to a reserved officer, first opening the gate, there is an inhibition. Knocking the door, there is an inhibition. You don't know what. All of this is not conscious. Please understand, none of this is happening consciously. The reserved officer is not conscious that, oh, I'm a reserved officer, this is a wealthy man, he's from the upper caste, I don't touch him. No, 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 none of this is conscious. This is all unconscious. This is all at a subconscious level. There is a certain inhibition that this officer experiences, and because of that, there is a change in terms of results. If you send an open category officer, he will come back with, so, and also his demeanor, because he is not ever told to be subservient. You know, his father or grandfather did not face punishment and penalty for, you know, for being brash or open. But that is not the case with the reserved. At least in the grandfather or the father generation, they would have faced severe penalties, maybe beatings, maybe certain kind of would have been put through certain experiences, which then slow them down. You know, they can't interrogate with the same force. May again, like I'm saying, may not be so much in your generation. I'm not, the younger officers that I'm seeing, I don't see that, but in the older generation of officers, it's much more evident. You will notice that uh, because he is able to interrogate with that authority of an officer, because it comes natural to him, he's able to extract more, he's able to scare the smuggler or the culprit of the crime. And because once the person gets scared, he will blabber more, he will get scared more, he will either admit it or he will break down more easily in the interrogation. But not so with the reserved officer, because the reserved officer is not going to be as brash, as intimidating, as offensive as the open category officer is going to. Again, these are general. I have also seen reserved officers who are much more aggressive, or I have seen general officers who are very smooth and very, they are smooth, but they are not inhibited. There is no inhibition. They're just smooth. That is style. Anyway, what will happen because of this is, after 3 or 4 cases, you will notice that the open category officer is able to get the solve the crime or get the investigation report more quickly, because also the culprit is more scared and therefore is willing to cooperate more readily as opposed to the other officer. Therefore, when finally an opening comes for the investigation branch or the crime branch or intelligence, the open category officer is picked up over the reserved category officer. The reserved category officer is generally given the other sections roles. Again, this is a gross generalization. There are many, many exceptions to this, and it is important for you to appreciate it. As sociologists and as members of the society, caste system is a very real institution. Caste is a social institution. And look how, because you are born in a certain caste, or because you're born of a certain gender, again, the same departments are also largely male. Okay, again, you will notice accident of birth, because you need to do certain things. You know, you need to be able to go into certain places. There was a time when some of my colleagues had to stay in a van outside. It was a joint operation, and we had to stay outside who we believed has terrorist links. We had to stay in a van for my colleagues had to stay in a van for 36 hours. Imagine 4 men, they can stay for 36 hours, but imagine if there was one woman in that. You can't come out of the van, because if you come out of the van, the people in the building get suspicious and you will be just shot, you'll be killed immediately. Now, if there are 4 men, the dynamic is one thing. I want you to visualize, can you visualize 36 hours, 40 hours staying inside a van? Your biological needs, your food, everything else has to happen inside that. It is one thing if there are 4 men, but imagine if there is one lady officer, what happens? Now, I'm giving an extreme example. That's not the case. I mean, there are also simpler examples, and many times, at least, there are other ways to do intelligence. This is not the only way to do intelligence. This is field intelligence, what I'm talking about. But get a hang of it. Try to understand your gender, your caste. These are institutions, and they have a bearing on you. You can't just overwrite them. I'll give you another example. Take a swimming pool. In a swimming pool, a woman or a man can be in his trunk and he can run about, or a woman can be in her swimsuit, and it won't look odd, because that is a gymnasium, or that is a sports facility, or that is But the same woman, same clothes, put her in a restaurant, and it will be crazy. That is because that is a different space and that is a different institution. So institutions are external to you, but they have a force upon you. They have an independent existence of their own. And that, as a sociologist, if there is one thing that you need to appreciate, it is that these institutions have a life of their own and they have a bearing upon you, on your life, on your actions, on your choices, on what you can do and cannot do is determined by these institutions. And one needs to appreciate that. Then there are other definitions. You can look at them, or you can just read them. The others are fairly straightforward. They are, if you look at the H.P. Fairchild, not Ginsberg, the next definition: sociology is the study of relationship between man and his human environment. I remember explaining in detail about this in the first class. So these other definitions you can read and straight away understand. But social institutions is something that you need to appreciate. All right, so that is about definition of sociology. Now let's go into scope, which is the real syllabus. Now, when you say scope, you are referring to an area of study or a field of inquiry. What is the subject matter? Okay, each subject has its own field of study. Okay, obviously, political science studies the state and power. Economics studies market, the economy. It studies the market and the interactions between in the market. Okay. Psychology studies the human mind, the human emotions, the human thoughts. Each subject has its own subject matter. So does sociology. But the problem with sociology is sociology also studies the state. It studies power. Sociology also studies the economy. Economic sociology, political sociology. Economic sociology, it studies the market. It studies how people interact. In fact, Karl Marx is more an economist than a sociologist, more an economic philosopher, really. Okay. Max Weber talks about bureaucracy. If you read Public Administration or Political Science, all of bureaucracy is written by Max Weber. We study him as a sociologist. So the problem with sociology is sociology tries to, we'll get into the scope. Yeah, sociology tries to study society as a whole, not just the state, not just the market, not just the civil society, not just the human mind, but all of it. Now, study of sociology is organized within a specific boundary, which is known as the scope of sociology. Now, what is that scope and what is that subject matter? There are two different views. One is that sociology studies, see, remember one thing. By the time sociology was born, all other academic disciplines were already born. We are the youngest social science. So there is a certain insecurity that we have. And obviously, in the initial days, other philosophers, people from other disciplines started asking, hey, what are these people doing? We are anyway studying the same things. I mean, what is the new thing that you're coming and studying? There is no point. There is nothing called sociology. It is just hocus pocus. I mean, there's no need. We are already there, whether it's economics or political science. So sociology had a need. There was an insecurity, and there was a need to establish why sociology is a discipline on its own merit. So the first school of sociologists, who are called the Formalist School or the Specialist School, they argue that we study something that other academic disciplines don't study. So we are a specialized study. We are also a formal study. We are not like other social sciences. We study differently. We study the formal structures. While other social sciences study the society or the state or the market as it is, we study the formal structures. I will explain to you what formal structures are. For now, just go with the word. They said that we study the formal structures of the society, and that is how we are different. Now, that was one school of sociologists who said the scope of sociology is specialist or formalistic because we are different from other social sciences. The idea is that we are either different in what we study That is, we study something differently. We study something that others are not studying. The what is different, or the how is different. We study what they study, but we study differently. Either what we study is different or how we study is different, but basically it is different from other social sciences. That is one school. That is the formalist school. Formally, how we study formally, they don't study formally. Or what we study, which is specialist school. We study the civil society, the social institutions. They study market and economic institutions, we study social institutions. That is how we are different. Is one school. Largely German school is this. Okay. Then you have the other school, the synthetic school, which says no, we study. The difference between them and us is they study bits, we study the whole. Okay. I don't know if you know, there is a field in medicine called integrated biology. So very often in medicine they get very specialized, and after MBBS they go into specializations, either cardiology, pulmonology, cardiology with the heart, pulmonology with the lungs, or just the liver specialist. You have the brain, the neurosurgery, or neurospecialist. So you have different specializations. Each organ becomes different. But what at some point you need to understand is, or what a general physician usually understands is, each one is linked to the other. Each organ of the body is not independent of the other. It is not functioning absolutely independently. They are actually interacting with each other. A problem in one organ affects another organ, and your symptom could be because of what is the later organ that is affected, but actually the problem could be somewhere else. And this is something that there is a discipline, integrated biology, which attempts to understand the different connections between these organs. Okay, think of sociology as something like that. The synthetic school of sociology, the school of sociologists who argue that sociology, the scope of sociology is synthetic. Synthetic meaning it comes together, it brings together everything as a whole. It will study. Okay, it studies human society as a whole, not in parts, and that is called the synthetic school. So like I said, there are, as far as the scope of sociology is concerned, there is a disagreement, unlike in other subjects. Actually, these days in every subject there is a disagreement about what constitutes the scope of that particular discipline. In some ways, every discipline is expanding increasingly and moving into other areas. It's very common, but anyway. So sociology, unlike them, has always been, there's a difference of opinion. And like I said, there are two major schools, the formal school and the synthetic school. Now, first start with the formal school. George Simmel, it's spelt as Simmel, pronounced as Zimmel, Simmel. So again, German sociologist. According to George, when I say philosopher, any academic of serious repute, and in those days before the disciplines were made, you can call them philosophers, which is why you have something like a PhD. Any person, regardless of what they do their MA in, when they do their PhD, they have a doctorate in philosophy. So in some ways, every philosophy, nothing means, again, Latin word, phil means friend or lover of. Philosophy, Sophie means knowledge. Sophie actually means knowledge. So philosophy is a lover of knowledge or a friend of knowledge. So someone who loves knowledge. So yeah, so philosophy is like a blanket term. You can use it to any person, to many academics, serious academics, more so people who are doing foundational level academics, like fundamental academics, not very applied level academics. It is the difference between a scientist and an engineer. An engineer will try to apply, a scientist will read the principles. In science, again, there is applied science and fundamental science, so it's something like that. The more fundamental, the more philosophical it gets. Now, Zimmel says sociology should confine its study to formal behavior instead of studying actual behavior. Now, to understand the word formal, formal is a technical term. The best way to understand it is geometry. Geometry is your formal representation of actual reality. For instance, a triangle, a triangle in a geometry. In reality, the closest that you see to a triangle is a mountain. But a mountain is not a perfect triangle. Okay. However, when you see many triangle shaped objects in reality, which none of them is a perfect triangle, unless it's man made, there will not be a perfect triangle or there will not be a perfect circle. Circle is a simpler example. There won't be a perfect circle. There will always be just that, about that. But even 2000 years back, mathematicians, philosophers, Euclid, great Greek philosopher and mathematician, could extrapolate. That is the form. Perfect form is a circle. In reality, when you say sun is a circle or earth is spherical, it is not a perfect sphere. It has, the reality is very different. But geometry as a discipline doesn't care about what the reality is, or doesn't care too much about what the reality is. It is trying to understand the form. Circle is a form, triangle is a form, square is a form. And from there it builds on. Then from triangle, it goes into the whole mathematics of trigonometry, which is wonderful in itself. But it is able to do that basing on formal. So in reality, you're not going to have exact right angle triangle and all. But if you can extract from reality, if you can extract the form, and you can develop the form more and more. In fact, in some ways, if you think, what is a number also, what is a digit, what is 5? When I say the number 5, what comes to your mind is actually uh, how we write 5 in English, basically. That is only a symbol. What does 5 represent? For a child, when you're teaching 5, you say, that's why you always start with 5 fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 5 balls, 5 cars, 5 mangoes. The number 5 is abstracted from the reality. 5 is a formal entity. It is not real. It is not actual. Just like the shape of geometry is form, it is the form. It is not real. It is formal. It is perfect. It is with our mental mind, with our mind, we have created this thing called triangle or a circle, which are perfect. A perfect straight line, parallel lines. All of these are man-made forms, inspired by nature, inspired by reality, but man-made forms. Now, understand. Zimmel is saying sociology should confine its study to formal behavior instead of studying actual behavior. Now, do you understand? So, for instance, instead of studying in economics, what do they study? They study in microeconomics. They study how a buyer and a seller interact. Okay, as a buyer or as a seller, you need to understand the law of demand and supply. So if there is more supply in the market, the demand reduces, and vice versa. Now, this is what happens in reality. This is studying what people do. But what we do is we go one step behind. What we say is there are two kinds of basic social interaction, either competition or cooperation. Whether it is between two tribes or two individuals, what is happening? They're either competing or they're cooperating. That is the form. Do you understand? Like, you are trying to understand, or you say in political science, they try to understand how to make the government, is democratic government better, or is a dictatorial government better? They will study reality, like different kinds of government, and how to elect. Okay, do you elect by vote? Do you elect by different people have equal representation, or different people have different representation? What does one mean? What does the other mean? All of this is studied in political science, and they try to then check in reality, what kind of elections, what kind of democracy, what do sociologists do? You can take a form. You can say basically, why even government? Why state? Because human society is organized in a hierarchy. There is a dominance hierarchy, just like there is a dominance hierarchy in the animal world. And in order to determine who goes higher in the dominance hierarchy and who goes lower, we have state is one way to ascertain it. So in state, the king is higher, and then there are ministers, then there are civil servants, then there is common man. This is one hierarchy. Now, sociology tries to understand the hierarchy itself. That it tries to say societies have a triangle, that there is usually inequality, and the inequality is in the shape of a triangle. That is the form. Instead of trying to say which government is better, which in which country which kind of government exists, why is democracy better than monarchy, or monarchy better than aristocracy, we are not looking into the reality of it. We are looking at the form. Every society has a triangle. That is a form. To say that in every society there is a social inequality, in every human interaction there is either competition or cooperation, or organizations have division of labor. Okay, different people do different job, and that is how division of labor happens. Management tries to study how to divide, or how to improve that division, or how to make it more efficient, how to increase output. These are very real problems. What sociology does is it says there is division of labor in an organization. That is what defines an organization. Are you getting it? Like basically we are looking at the forms into a very abstracted form rather than the particular, the actual. And that is how, if you look at let's continue with the definition. Sociology comprehends the forms of social science which describes, analyzes, classifies, and delineates forms of social relationships, the process of socialization and social organization, etc. Okay, remember, science is a formal subject. Okay, physics is formal, because in physics, again, you don't deal with reality. In physics, there is a perfect circle. There is the object is 100 grams, 100 grams. It doesn't matter what the reality is. I mean, the real if you're doing an experiment, it has to be close. But again, in your mathematics and in your notations, what you write is perfect. It is formal. In fact, what distinguishes Newton's physics from Aristotelian physics until then is the formal method, the mathematical. Newton is the one who discovered calculus, your integration and differentiation that you do in your plus one, plus two. It was discovered by Newton in order to explain his physical laws of motion. To do that, he invented calculus. Now, calculus is a formal method. It is a way of formally denoting the reality. Reality in actual is different. In the formal, it is different. In reality, there is a mountain which looks like a triangle, but in geometry, there is a perfect triangle. And the perfect triangle then has laws. The laws are the sum of the three angles is 180 degrees. Mountain won't have. Mountain will, because mountain is not a perfect triangle, but we are able to abstract it. This is a very human capacity of the human mind to be able to abstract like that and form ideal things, forms, like a triangle. So now sociology comprehends the forms of social science. So other social sciences deal with the actuality. We comprehend the forms of that social science. So while political science studies the state itself, we study the forms of state. While economics studies the market itself, we study forms of economic behavior. Okay, what are those forms of economic behavior? We will see in due course of the sessions. We study the forms of social relationships, Like I said, cooperation, competition, things like that. Those are forms. And their contents, what does that entail? What does an in-group and an out-group entail? Every individual feels that they are part of an in-group and part of an out-group. For example, one of my primary identity is as a civil servant. I am part of the in-group. I am in the group of civil servants. Okay. What I am not, I am not an Olympian. I am an outgroup for an Olympian. I am not an actor. I'm not in the entertainment industry. So that is an outgroup for me. Or I belong to a particular religion. I am in group. That religion is an in group for me, and other religions are out group for me. So sociology gives this. This is how. Just read that. It classifies and forms of social relation. Do you see the forms of social in group and out group? That structure, that there is the concept called in group, the concept called out group, that you can use to explain several phenomena, several relations, several identities that an individual holds. But that concept itself, in group, out group, is given by sociology, and that is a form. Okay, I hope you're getting it. And how do you do it? You do it by, as he says, sociology comprehends the forms of social science, which describes, analyzes, classifies, and delineates. What you do is you first observe, you notice what are individuals doing, what are humans doing, and then you notice they behave in certain way inside a group and they behave differently outside a group. Okay, they are more accommodative of people inside the group, they are more rigid and more um, against, usually in competition with people outside the group. That is not entirely the case. There is also competition within the group. Okay, but that competition has a very different set of rules. Okay, anyway, so it describes, it analyzes them, it carefully examines them, then it classifies. The classification in this case is in group and out group. It's a classification, and delineates. Now you will delineate and say where is in group, where is out group, what is in group, what is out group. The forms of social relationship. Okay, the process of socialization, it also gives forms for process of socialization. How do you socialize with people? uh, like I said, cooperation is one way of socialization, competition is another way of socialization. Okay, but sociology gives, what sociology studies, what are the processes of socialization, their contents, and opines that sociology should confine itself in explaining different forms of social relationships and study them in abstraction, whereas their contents are dealt with by other social sciences. So other social sciences are dealing with the contents, we are studying them in abstraction. That is the difference between sociology and political science. It is important for you to appreciate this part of formalistic sociology, or whatever I'm saying now, because very often part of the reason why sociology is a very scoring discipline and it is easy is because most of the topics are very heard. You have heard those topics, which is why I have seen people write very generic answers and still get qualifying marks. They will get average marks. And compared to other disciplines, yes, you will be able to write something or the other. When I give you a question saying democracy or something else, or say I tell capitalism, you know something about capitalism, you know something about free market economy. From your GS, you will know enough to write an answer. And I have seen people get decent marks with that. But if you want to get a really, and my aim in this course and my aim to you guys is that you will get the cream marks, among the top marks for sociology. And it is possible. And what differentiates an average mediocre sociology answer and a top sociology answer is being able to write a sociology answer like sociology answer and not like a political science or an economics answer, because that much you will anyway know. The thing about civil services is your general studies has to be strong. For you to even qualify prelims, it has to be strong. By the time you come to mains, you know enough GS. So almost on any topic you can write something. And sociology deals with very generic topics. But your answer, now look at this. It shouldn't look at the line where it says, Simmel makes a distinction between the forms of socials and their contents and opines that sociology should confine itself in explaining. From here, pay attention. different forms of social relationships and study them in abstraction, whereas their contents are dealt with by other social sciences. So other social sciences are going to deal with the content. So when I give you a question like capitalism and its social problems, okay, the kind of problems that economists will come up with, you will also be able to write capitalism and its social problems. You will say, what one of the things that you will talk about is obviously with the development there is a reallocation and people lose their livelihoods, because of capitalist system. Traditional livelihoods are lost, um, which is what happens in actuality. But what Marx says is something very different. Marx talks about how society itself becomes unequal. The rich become richer and the poor become poorer, according to Marx. Okay, and for now, let's assume Marx is right. Okay, that is formal. Or he says, unlike in a traditional system, when somebody is making something, okay, even in slavery or even in feudalism, say there was a carpenter who is making a table, or there is a cobbler who's making a shoe. When you make a shoe, all said and done, man is a creative, human beings are creative beings and they want to create things. When they are creating a shoe, there is a satisfaction of creating, of making it, and that process of creation itself is a deeply satisfying process. It is a different thing that I might have to make that shoe for the king and not for myself. That's okay. But that process of creating is a deeply satisfying process. Or a table, maybe I'm too poor to have the table, I'm making it for the lord, for the princess, but the process of taking that wood, cutting it, making it is a deeply satisfying process. What Marx says is, in capitalism, in a factory, when a worker goes, say in an IKEA factory or one of those factories, when a worker goes and he doesn't decide what wood to choose, what color it is, what is the design of the table, it is already given by somebody else. All he has to do is go and repeat the same action. A worker in a capitalist system does not have control on the product that he's making, the process of making it, and because the product and process of making it is what makes him feel like a human, otherwise he's an animal. Okay, what makes humans are is our creative capacity, that we can create things. And because he is not able to have control on what he's creating, on what he's working, he feels alienated from himself. He doesn't feel like himself. A classic example for any of you would be, if some of your friends are working, how much they hate to work. Almost a lot of people in the software industry, a lot of people in the capitalist modern factory work very, very grudgingly, very, very bitterly for the 5 days so that they can enjoy and live in those 2 days. Why is it that it is so grudging for those 5 days? Why do they hate their work so much? If I don't really give you work and ask you to just sit and do nothing, you'll go mad. Humans by instinct are creative people. We will just go pick something, make something out of it. If I leave you in a forest, or if I leave you in a park, you will naturally go pick a piece of wood, try to carve it. Something you're going to do. You're going to sit and imagine. It is creativity is what defines human beings. It is what makes us human. It makes us feel alive. But if we are not able to do that, which according to Marx, in the capitalist system, in a factory, you are not allowed to be creative, and therefore you experience something called alienation. Is a concept that will come. It is part of the syllabus. We'll have more than a class on just what alienation is. But now get a hang of it. Try to understand. Now, this is a universal condition of capitalism, according to Marx. This is formal. What is the real problem? How workers and how laborers and the factory owner, how they are fighting and how to resolve that? That is a problem of the management discipline, not us. We are talking about how the general human condition is alienation. Even now, you may have slight lack of clarity with terms of what is this formal, what is this abstracting method. It is hard. as the course go on, I will keep coming back to this again. And as the course go on, you will get clearer and clearer about what is this method of abstraction that we are doing in sociology, which other social sciences are directly dealing with the contents of that problem or that issue. We abstract it. What is that is something you will learn. The last part of the definition: cooperation, competition, subordination, division of labor, etc., are different forms of social relationships. As sociology confines itself in studying forms of social relationships, its scope is very limited or specialist, which is why this kind of defining the scope of sociology is called specialist sociology or formalistic sociology. Let us move to the next slide. Synthetic sociology. Now, synthetic sociology largely came, okay, you have to understand the word synthesis. Synthesis means to fuse, to bring together. Okay, synthetic also means man-made or artificial. That's another meaning of synthetic, but this is earlier times. In earlier days, that is a very recent meaning. We have synthetic polymers and things like that. That's a very recent meaning, just 40, 50 years back. Before that, the word synthesis meant syn, S-Y-N. The prefix S-Y-N means to come together. Thesis is an idea. Okay, so it's a fusion of ideas. Synthesis is a fusion of ideas. So synthetic sociology came into existence in reaction to the formalistic school of thought. It tries to make sociology a synthesis of the social sciences or a general science, an encyclopedic. Now, these people came as a reaction to formalistic school, the specialist school. They say that we need to come together. What sociology does is it studies all of social sciences, all of society as a whole. Remember, before the break, I was giving you an example of the integrated biology, which is looking at different organs of the human body not as separate units, independent units of themselves, but as integrated whole, and how one affects the other. Okay, so they say that the difference between political science, economics, history, geography is they see in parts. Geography sees something, demography sees something, political science sees something, economics sees something, history sees something, sociology sees all of it. We as a discipline are different in that we see all of it, the whole, and that is how we are different. This is called the synthetic school. It tries to, if you notice, it tries to make sociology a synthesis of social sciences or a general science, an encyclopedic, which is it brings everything together. According to this school of thought, the scope of sociology is very wide and all inclusive. It brings everything. According to this school of thought, different aspects of social life are interrelated. We can't understand society with the study of one aspect only. Hence, sociology should attempt to study social life as a whole. Now, one of the main advocates of the synthetic school is a French sociologist called Émile Durkheim. He opines that sociology is made of three main divisions: social morphology, social physiology, and social general sociology. He is in turn actually developing from the works of Auguste Comte, an important founding thinker, one of the founders of sociology. We will be discussing Comte and Durkheim in detail in the coming classes. They are part of our syllabus. Each one is a unit. Each thinker is a unit in himself. Yeah. So just to go into, you don't have to really, for the scope of sociology part of the syllabus, for that topic, the question is pretty straightforward. Discuss the scope of sociology. Okay, usually that's the, you don't have to go into the second part of this, which is social morphology, social physiology, general sociology. You don't have to write these details. I gave them for you to appreciate and get a better handle on what synthetic sociology is. You can remember them. You can also make notes of them, but don't really try to. You don't have to memorize them. This will come as part of Durkheim again. That time you can remember, and that time you have to remember. But now it is basically for you to understand what synthetic sociology is. It has three divisions. Durkheim puts it as synthetic sociology has three divisions. One is social morphology. It includes all those subjects which are fundamentally geographic, such as population, size, density, distribution, mobility, etc. Um, so this is basically demography. Okay, morphology has to do with what is the structure, what is the social structure. Okay, uh, and these are, that population, how many people are there, how many old people, how many young people, which gender, which caste, which religion, your basic population census, and which people stay where, because in those days they also used to believe that geography determined, or where you stayed determined your culture, and your culture tells you how to interact. So basically, human interaction, social interaction, is governed by culture, which in turn is determined by the climate, the weather, the geography. Whether it's an island or a desert, whether it is tropical or temperate, determine what the culture is going to be, and that culture in turn will determine what the social interaction should be, what the rules of engagement should be. So sociology also studies that to begin with. It studies those demographics, what we call, all those data. Then what is social physiology? Social physiology is inclusive of all those subjects that are studied by particular social sciences, such as religion. We have religious sociology. It's a topic in your syllabus. It's one full unit. We have economy, which is economic sociology. We have language, which is cultural sociology. We have morals, laws, etc. Legal sociology is not part of your setup, but law, think of it like political sociology. You do have political sociology in your in your unit. In other words, social physiology has different branches, such as sociology of law, sociology of religion, etc., which are regarded as special aspects of sociology. And sociology then studies one aspect, like the law, like the religion, like education, okay, like marriage and kinship, like the state. It studies something which comes in social physiology. And finally, there is general sociology, is the philosophical part of sociology. Its function is to discover the general character of these social facts to formulate general social laws. Okay, once it picks these things, it is able to, like I said, it is able to abstract from those social facts. It is able to abstract and formulate general social laws. Even by Durkheim, there is still a faith that, just like in physics, just like in natural world, they are able to discover natural laws. They believed that the social world has social laws, natural, it has laws, and those laws can be discovered. So they are saying that you can study social facts and discover those laws. Okay, so that is synthetic sociology. Uh, Usually it is a 10 marker if it comes. It doesn't come every year. Scope of sociology, the question on scope of sociology, and it is sufficient key. You just write two definitions and then say why scope is important. Every subject has to have a clearly defined scope. Otherwise, how do you distinguish this subject from another subject? Okay, to be able to distinguish, you need a scope. You need to define what your boundary is. That boundary is what you call scope. That is your area of study. And sociology attempts to there are two ways to understand what is the scope of sociology. One is the formalistic method, and the other is the synthetic method. And you can write what formalistic method is, what synthetic method is. Just that para, that the two slides, that this slide and the previous slide, without the Emile Durkheim part, just that top portion is more than enough. It will be enough for 100 words. That much is enough. You don't have to go more. You don't have to remember that. Try to understand it. I will give you more notes on formalistic and on synthetic.